Thank you, Mr. President. It's Godfrey, actually, it happens. Godfrey Bloom and Independence and Democracy, just to put you right on that. Commissioner Kallas seems to have read a completely different document. I can assure him that as a UK PLC, this simply would not do at all. If any UK PLC had filed accounts of this nature for 14 years, which have been completely unacceptable, and again this year, and I do not regard the Court of Auditors as having given this a clean bill of health at all, and I've read the document, if the Commission were a board of UK PLC directors, I have to say they would now be in prison. Now, we have a situation here where this Parliament, if Parliament it is, which spends most of the year talking about bendy bananas, knobbly parsnips, standardisation of bottle sizes, and on Tuesday we were even voting on the standardisation of tractor seats. So this absurd organisation spends most of its year doing nothing very much of value. We only have one serious responsibility, and that is to hold the Commission to account on the budget. That is the most serious thing we can do. And it is going to go through again for the 15th year on the nod. It is an utter disgrace, and let the British MEPs know I am watching very carefully how they vote, and I will make sure that it is known back in the UK what they do out here, in opposed to what they actually say when they go home.
Mr. President, as my friend Mr. Bloom quite rightly said earlier, it is simply not true to say that the accounts have been fully signed off by the auditors. It seems that about €6 billion cannot be properly accounted for. At current exchange rates, that is about £4.7 billion. Britain's net contribution to the EU budget in 2007 was £4.3 billion. The net amount is after the UK rebate and our own money spent in our own country. There is, of course, no such thing as EU money. An amount of money exceeding the UK taxpayers' net contribution to the EU budget is quite possibly finding its way into the pockets of fraudsters. This neatly sums up British membership of the European Union, a complete and utter total waste of money. More and more British people are realising that the European Union...
Thank you, Mr. Benton.
President, Mr. Barroso says, I think my team is of high quality. Well, let's conduct a human audit. Now, I'm mindful that audits aren't very popular in the European Commission, and that auditors, if they do their job properly, get fired, but nonetheless, here goes. From France, we have Mr. Jacques Barrot. He'll take on transport. In 2000, he received an 8-month suspended jail sentence for his involvement in an embezzlement case and was banned from holding public office for 2 years. From Hungary, we have Mr. Kovács. He'll take on taxation. For many years, a communist apparatchik, a friend of Mr. Kadar, the dictator there, and an outspoken opponent of the values that we hold dear in the West. His new empire will produce taxation policy, and he'll look after the customs union from Cork across to Vilnius. Are the EPP and British Conservatives really going to vote for that? From Estonia, we have Mr. Kallas. For 20 years, a Soviet party apparatchik, until his newly acquired taste for capitalism got him into some trouble. Though, to be fair, he was acquitted of abuse and fraud, but convicted for providing false information, and he's going to be in charge of the anti-fraud drive. I mean, you couldn't make it up. From the UK, we've got Peter Mandelson. He'll take on the trade portfolio. He, of course, twice was removed from the British government, yet, to be fair, he's one of the more competent ones. From the Netherlands, we've got Nelly Kroes. She'll take on competition. She's accused of lying to the European Parliament. Now, these may only be allegations, but they're made by Mr. Van Buitenen, and I think should be listened to. Ask yourself a question. Would you buy a used car from this Commission?
Quelles sont, messieurs les présidents, nos priorités? La première, c'est de montrer aux Européens que l'Europe peut les protéger. Et je voudrais dire un mot de ce vocabulaire, la protection. Mais depuis la plus haute antiquité, si les hommes se sont dotés d'une puissance publique, c'est parce que cette puissance publique se devait de les protéger. Monsieur le Président du Parlement européen, l'Europe doit protéger sans être protectionniste. Moi-même, en tant que président de la République française, j'ai dû prendre mes responsabilités. La France a voté non en 2005. J'ai dit avant les élections que je n'organiserai pas de référendum en France. Je pense profondément que les questions institutionnelles, les règles de fonctionnement en Europe sont l'affaire des parlementaires plutôt que l'affaire du référendum.
The President of the Czech Republic.
Herr Präsident, ich darf Sie bitten, zu uns zu sprechen. Vielen Dank.
Spíše jako řečnickou otázku se proto ptám, zda jste si při každém svém hlasování jisti, že rozhodujete o věci, o které je nutno rozhodovat právě v tomto sále a ne blíže k občanovi, tedy uvnitř jednotlivých evropských států. Dnešní systém rozhodování v Evropské unii je něčím jiným než historií prověřenou a v historii osvědčenou klasickou parlamentní demokracií. V obvyklém parlamentním systému je část podporující vládu a část opoziční. Ale to, pokud se nemýlim, v Evropském parlamentu není. Zde je prosazována alternativa jen jedna a kdo uvažuje o alternativě jiné, je považován za odpůrce evropské integrace. Řešením není ani přitápění pod tavícím kotlem dosavadního typu evropské integrace, ani potlačování role členských států pod heslem nové multikulturální a multinacionální evropské občanské společnosti. To jsou pokusy, které v minulosti selhaly, neboť nebyly projevem přirozeného historického vývoje.
Dieses Europäische Parlament eine wichtige Institution ist. Wären wir heute nicht so einflussreich, wären wir heute nicht der Gesetzgeber in 75% der Fälle und wären wir nicht mit dem Vertrag von Lissabon der Mitgesetzgeber in nahezu 100% der Fälle, dann in der Tat wäre es so, dass die Bürokratie in Europa entscheiden würde. Aber jetzt entscheidet das Europäische Parlament.
We're living through exceptionally difficult times. The financial crisis and its dramatic impact on employment and budgets, the climate crisis which threatens our very survival, a period of anxiety, uncertainty and lack of confidence. Yet these problems can be overcome by a joint effort in and between our countries. 2009 is also the first year of global governance with the establishment of the G20 in the middle of the financial crisis. The climate conference in Copenhagen is another step towards the global management of our planet.
Let's hear that again.
2009 is also the first year of global governance with the establishment of the G20 in the middle of the financial crisis. The climate conference in Copenhagen is another step towards the global management of our planet.
Good morning, Mr Van Rompuy. You've been in office for 1 year, and in that time the whole edifice is beginning to crumble. There's chaos. The money's running out. I should thank you. You should perhaps be the pin-up boy of the Eurosceptic movement. But just look around this chamber this morning. Just look at these faces. Look at the fear. Look at the anger. Poor old Barroso here looks like he's seen a ghost. You know, they're beginning to understand that the game is up. And yet, in their desperation to preserve their dream, they want to remove any remaining traces of democracy from the system. And it's pretty clear that none of you have learned anything. You know, when you yourself, Mr Van Rompuy, say that the euro has brought us stability, I suppose I could applaud you for having a sense of humour, but isn't this really just the bunker mentality? You know, your fanaticism is out in the open. You talked about the fact that it was a lie to believe that the nation state could exist in a 21st century globalised world? Well, that may be true in the case of Belgium, who haven't had a government for 6 months, but for the rest of us, right across every member state in this union, and perhaps this is why we see the fear in the faces, increasingly people are saying, we don't want that flag, we don't want the anthem, we don't want this political class, we want the whole thing consigned to the dustbin of history. And we had the Greek tragedy earlier on this year, and now we have the situation in Ireland. Now I know that the stupidity and greed of Irish politicians has a lot to do with this. They should never ever have joined the euro. They suffered with low interest rates, a false boom and a massive bust. But look at your response to them. What they're being told, as their government's collapsing, is that it would be inappropriate for them to have a general election. In fact, Commissioner Wren here said they had to agree their budget first before they'd be allowed to have a general election. Just who the hell do you think you people are? You are very, very dangerous people indeed. Your obsession with creating this Euro state means that you're happy to destroy democracy. You appear to be happy for millions and millions of people to be unemployed and to be poor. Untold millions must suffer so that your Euro dream can continue. Well, it won't work, because it's Portugal next. With their debt levels of 325% of GDP, they're the next ones on the list, and after that, I suspect it'll be Spain. And the bailout for Spain would be 7 times the size of Ireland, and at that moment, all of the bailout money has gone. There won't be any more. But it's even more serious than economics, because if you rob people of their identity, if you rob them of their democracy, then all they are left with is nationalism and violence. I can only hope and pray that the Euro project is destroyed by the markets before that really happens.
Thank you.
Shrouded in secrecy, an invite-only meeting of the world's political and financial elite is underway in Switzerland. The annual gathering of the Bilderberg Group has attracted strong opposition. Protesters don't want the fate of the world to be decided behind closed doors. RT's Laura Emmett has been following the meeting.
Opposition to the Bilderberg Group meeting here in Switzerland has brought together parties and special interest groups from across the spectrum of political beliefs. And it's not just the Swiss. People have come from further afield, Germany, Austria, the UK and even the US, to try to report on or just to object in person to this group of powerful people meeting in secret. We've also heard reports of alternative media journalists being threatened with deportation by police and other low-level harassment. Among the protesters is Switzerland's youngest member of parliament for the People's Party. He came up here to fight for transparency. Here's what he told me.
People have a right to know what's happening in the Suffragette House, what's happening at the Bilderberg meeting. People want to know what do they decide there, who is there, what have they for plans for the future. And I'm here for more transparency.
The agenda of the Bilderberg Group remains secret until long after the meeting's over, but Bilderberg watchers make an educated guess about what's being discussed. This year it's saving the euro, a Bilderberg invention, deciding the new head of the International Monetary Fund to replace their infamous colleague Dominique Strauss-Kahn, and of course the events of the Arab Spring, which notable Bilderberg watchers accuse the group of exacerbating into a bloody war to try and hike up the oil price. Some accuse the Bilderbergers of masterminding the financial crisis, and given the dire economic fate of the last 2 Bilderberg host countries, Greece and Spain, some fear for the future of independent non-EU member Switzerland.
Τώρα για ένα λεπτό επίσης ο κύριος Μποργέζιο έχει το λόγο.
Noi discutiamo su questi vari argomenti. Negli Stati Uniti è molto vivo il dibattito su una questione che io ritengo centrale, cioè il ritorno ai principi della legge Glass-Steagall, della separazione delle banche ordinarie dalle banche di speculazione che hanno causato i gravissimi guasti di cui le nostre economie e i nostri popoli stanno pagando pesantemente il prezzo. E mentre qui ci vengono presentate delle soluzioni, una decina di giorni fa nel chiuso e nel segreto delle riunioni del club Bilderberg molti esponenti dell'alta burocrazia e delle leadership politiche europee si sono riuniti probabilmente per dare le direttive alle direttive che poi verranno presentate al Parlamento europeo.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Commission have recently replied to my written question confirming that Commissioners Almunia and Kroes attended the Bilderberg meeting in St. Moritz in June. The Commission cannot tell me details of what was discussed, but assure me that the Bilderberg meetings do not take decisions. If Bilderberg meetings are just talking shops, why do the most important and powerful figures from around the world, including George Osborne, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, bother to attend? And what other summit of world leaders in politics, finance and business would go completely unreported in the mainstream media, such as the BBC? It is impossible not to reach the conclusion that the non-reporting of these events is anything other than a conspiracy between the organisers and the media. It merely confirms the belief of many that the hidden agenda and purpose of the Bilderberg Group is to bring about undemocratic world government. It's a disgrace that the European Commission is colluding in that.
La questione delle nomine, molto importante. Oggi sulle agenzie c'è un corollario di voci, di riunioni, non si sa nemmeno se dovrà esserci una riunione straordinaria a Bruxelles. Ma io mi domando una cosa, esaminando i nomi che circolano. Per esempio, mi limito a tre: Balkenende, Miliband e Van Rompuy. Ma è mai possibile che nessuno abbia osservato che tutti e tre sono frequentatori delle riunioni vuoi del Bilderberg, vuoi della trilaterale? Beh, io credo che si debbano stabilire dei principi di trasparenza, tanto sovente indicati a parole dalle nostre istituzioni, e si debba chiedere con chiarezza a queste persone se sono i candidati del loro paese nelle forze politiche o di questi gruppi occulti che si riuniscono a porte chiuse e decidono sulla pelle e sulla testa dei popoli.
The Council on Foreign Relations. Today, the CFR maintains that its goal is to increase America's understanding of the world. However, the actual objective of this highly exclusive club is revealed by the rare admissions of the insiders themselves. In the early 60s, a Georgetown University professor collects information for a book favorable to the network of powerful men who founded the CFR. For 2 years, Professor Carroll Quigley is allowed to examine the confidential papers and secret records of this network. Quigley reveals that these men aim to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. In short, they seek total and quiet control of the entire world. And the CFR is their most visible conduit for carrying out that agenda. CFR members include America's wealthiest tycoons, as well as the highly placed elite in government, academic institutions, tax-exempt foundations, and the establishment media. Ruling Class Journalists, written by Richard Harwood, describes the CFR membership as the ruling establishment in the United States. The Washington Post article boasted that news reporters who are CFR members do not merely analyze and interpret foreign policy for the United States, they help make it. Who are these policymakers? Many of their faces are familiar. NBC's Tom Brokaw, CBS's Dan Rather, ABC's Barbara Walters, Jim Lehrer of PBS, William F. Buckley of National Review, media mogul Rupert Murdoch, owner of the giant multifaceted News Corporation. These media heavyweights, and many others like them, are members of the CFR. Powerful corporations are also invited to become members. At the close of the 20th century, CFR influence presided over far-reaching consolidations of media control. In 1995, CFR members Michael Eisner of Disney and ABC's Thomas Murphy merged their media empires. Soon after the merger, the Disney-ABC empire becomes a CFR corporate member. In the year 2000, the world's largest internet service provider, America Online, joins forces with Time Warner, one of the world's largest news organizations. The CEOs favoring the move are CNN's Thomas Johnson and Time Warner's Gerald Levin, both CFR members. Once again, another media giant is created under the shadow of CFR influence. Today, an elite handful of individuals define the agendas that are supported by the empire of establishment news. A special televised meeting of the New York-based Council on Foreign Relations provides a window to the real story. The speaker, Vice President Dick Cheney, takes a question from David Rockefeller.
Vice President, I just enjoyed so much your whole speech, but I was particularly pleased that you gave such a strong endorsement for the free trade agreement for all the Americas, subject that has been of great concern to me for many years, and particularly recently, and I think it's absolutely essential for the strength of our economy.
Rockefeller's role in the drive for an FTAA was a lot more central than he portrays. Rockefeller cultivated Latin American leaders who could be counted on to support such a proposal. Both the 1994 Miami Summit and the FTAA proposal were conceived and nurtured by a Rockefeller-created network. Prominent among the organizations sponsoring the Miami event were the Council of the Americas, founder and honorary chairman David Rockefeller, the Americas Society, chairman David Rockefeller, the Forum of the Americas, founder David Rockefeller, the Institute for International Economics, financial backer and board member David Rockefeller, the Trilateral Commission, founder and honorary chairman David Rockefeller. Rockefeller's influence also extends to the current administration. He was chairman emeritus of the CFR when Vice President Dick Cheney once served as a director, a relationship that Cheney concealed during his congressional career.
It's good to be back at the Council on Foreign Relations. As Pete mentioned, I've been a member for a long time and was actually a director for some period of time. I never mentioned that when I was campaigning for re-election back home in Wyoming.
Thank you very much, Richard, and I am delighted to be here in these new headquarters. I have been often to, I guess, the mothership in New York City, but it's good to have an outpost of the Council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the Council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
Okay. The corporatocracy is this group of individuals, men mostly, a few women, who run our biggest corporations. And they really act as the emperor of this empire. They control our media, either through direct ownership or advertising. They control most of our politicians because they finance their campaigns, either through their corporations or through personal contributions that come out of the corporations. And they're not elected. They don't serve a limited term. They don't report to anybody. They really very, very much are running things, and they work under the premise that they should maximize profits regardless of the environmental and social costs. We economic hitmen really have been the ones responsible for creating this first truly global empire, and we work many different ways. But perhaps the most common is that we will identify a country that has resources our corporations covet, like oil, and then arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sister organizations. But the money never actually goes to the country. Instead, it goes to our big corporations to build infrastructure projects in that country, power plants, industrial parks, ports, things that benefit a few rich people in that country, in addition to our corporations, but really don't help the majority of the people at all. However, those people, the whole country is left holding a huge debt. It's such a big debt they can't repay it, and that's part of the plan, that they can't repay it. And so at some point, we economic hitmen go back to them and say, listen, you lost a lot of money, can't pay your debt, so sell your oil real cheap to our oil companies. Allow us to build a military base in your country, or send troops in support of ours to someplace in the world like Iraq, or vote with us on the next UN vote. To have their electric utility company privatized and their water and sewage system privatized and sold to U.S. corporations or other multinational corporations. So there's that whole mushrooming thing, and it's so typical of the way the IMF and the World Bank work, that you put a country in debt, and it's such a big debt it can't pay it, and then you offer to refinance that debt and pay even more interest. And you demand this quid pro quo, which you call a conditionality or good governance, which means basically that they've got to sell off their resources, including many of their social services, their utility companies, their school systems sometimes, their penal systems, their insurance systems, to foreign corporations. So it's a double, triple, quadruple whammy. Iraq actually is a perfect example of the way the whole system works. So we economic hitmen are the first line of defense. We go in and we try to corrupt governments and get them to accept these huge loans, which we then use as leverage to basically own them. If we fail, as I failed in Panama with Omar Torrijos and in Ecuador with Jaime Roldos, men who refuse to be corrupted. Then the second line of defense is we send in the jackals, and the jackals either overthrow governments or they assassinate. And once that happens and a new government comes in, boy, it's going to toe the line because the new president knows what will happen if he doesn't. In the case of Iraq, both of those things failed. Economic hitmen were not able to get through to Saddam Hussein. We tried very hard. We tried to get him to accept a deal very similar to what the House of Saud had accepted in Saudi Arabia, but he wouldn't accept it. And so the jackals went in to take him out. They couldn't do it. His security was very good. After all, he had one time worked for the CIA. He'd been hired to assassinate a former president of Iraq and failed, but he knew the system. So in '91, we send in the troops and we take out the Iraqi military. So we assume at that point that Saddam Hussein is going to come around. We could have taken him out, of course, at that time, but we didn't want to. He's the kind of strong man we like. He controls his people. We thought he could control the Kurds and keep the Iranians in their border and keep pumping oil for us. And then once we took out his military, now he's going to come around. So the economic hitmen go back in the 90s without success. If they'd had success, he'd still be running the country. We'd be selling him all the fighter jets he wants and everything else he wants. But they couldn't. They didn't have success. The jackals couldn't take him out again, so we sent the military in once again, and this time we did the complete job and took him out, and in the process created for ourselves some very, very lucrative construction deals. We had to reconstruct a country that we'd essentially destroyed, which is a pretty good deal if you own construction companies, big ones. So, Iraq shows the three stages. The economic hitmen failed there, the jackals failed there, and as a final measure, the military goes in.